Good afternoon, everybody. This is an extraordinary meeting of the Fire Resilience and Emergency Planning Committee. Under Section 1.7 of the Authority's Standing Orders, I confirm this meeting be called as a matter of urgency in order to hold a confirmation hearing for the Mayor's proposed appointees to the Office of London Fire Commissioner at the earliest opportunity, in accordance with Section 100B(4)(b) of the Local Government Act 1972. Can I welcome members of the committee and members of the public, both here and watching on webcast, to today's extraordinary meeting of the Fire Resilience and Emergency Planning Committee. Our main item of business today is to conduct a confirmation hearing for the proposed appointment to the Office of London Fire Commissioner. Could I ask everyone to check that their electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions? Members of the public may like to follow at London Assembly on Twitter and use the hashtag AssemblyFire for this meeting. Jonathan, have we any apologies for absence?
Apologies have been received from Assemblymember Bacon, for whom Assemblymember Arbor is substituting, and Assemblymember Eshalomi, for whom Assemblymember McCartney is substituting.
Thank you. Can I ask members to note the list of officers on the report and ask if they have any additional interests to declare?
Noted.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner, do you have any interests to declare which are relevant to the business of this meeting or in relation to your proposed appointment to the Office of London Fire Commissioner?
I do not.
Thank you. Right, that brings us to today's main item, a confirmation hearing for the proposed appointment to the Office of London Fire Commissioner. And can I welcome Andy Rowe, Deputy Commissioner, the Mayor's nominee for the Office of Fire Commissioner, to the meeting. Deputy Commissioner, at this hearing, the committee will be putting questions to you in relation to your proposed appointment as London Fire Commissioner. Before moving to the question and answer session, can I ask the committee to formally note the background information at appendices 2 to 6 of the report as circulated with the agenda?
Noted.
Thank you. So we now move on to the question and answer session, and members will put questions to the Deputy Commissioner. And perhaps I could start off, Andy. I know you were thinking of an opening statement, but we are pressed for time, so I think we'd like to go straight into questioning.
We understand.
And perhaps I could start because we had the report published today from the Inspectorate. Perhaps I could put to you, how do you think you can lead the challenge of change that the LFB will face under your leadership in responding to the recommendations of the Grenfell Tower Phase 1 inquiry and the HMI report, which is pretty critical, as was the report from the Grenfell inquiry?
I think what I'd like to start by saying is being clear that I recognise that what's been highlighted in both reports simply isn't good enough. I accept both the findings and the recommendations of both reports, and I'm committed to driving forward any of the changes required to deliver the improvements identified as being entirely necessary with an energy and a motivation as the new London Fire Commissioner. So I would like to make that just my opening statement, I guess. I think it's about motivating our staff to bring forward improvements that they know themselves they want. Our people will recognise much of what is in the reports. They know themselves well. They want to give Londoners the best service they can. They're excellent people. I think what is clear from both the reports is that there is system and organisational improvement that is desperately needed and will be made.
Well, thank you for that. There are two particular points I'd like just to pick up from both reports, actually. It's issues that we've been raising on this committee, and indeed I think probably from LFB, but before that, and that's incident command and training. Perhaps you could indicate what your views are on how to improve incident command and also training, particularly with incident command, but more generally as well, because we see the criticisms in relation to driver training as well, for example.
Yes, so I think training is an area that's highlighted in both reports. I think it's worth recognising that we conducted our own independent review of training undertaken by Robert Scott, and I believe you have had those papers. That report in itself, which preceded the publication of both reports, identified many of the same areas that required improvement. As a result, much work has already been done to put in train a process to make those improvements. So, for example, I can tell you that today, the first of a number of practical and theoretical sessions that will be delivered to all our station commanders took place, started at Lambeth Fire Station to brief them on new high-rise policy, and then give them a practical walkthrough of that. That will continue through into the new year. In the new year, we will be running a series of fire survival guidance training exercises, both on our own estate and on the public estate in high-rise buildings, to practice emergency evacuation, rescue and mass rescue, with a particular focus on how we conduct mass fire survival guidance, passage of information between control and incident commanders. Level 1, revalidation of incident command, begins at the end of January, which is the majority of our incident commanders, so those based on stations, and will be closely followed by our Level 2, our middle manager incident commanders. The planning for that having been signed off and the funds made available through redistribution of the training budget. I think that needs to be built on further. I'm clear that driving forward a deep-reaching leadership programme is one of my first priorities. The planning for that, again, has been in place for some time because it arose from the People Services Review, which, again, I understand you would have had copies of into this committee. The planning for that has now reached a stage where it is ready to carry forward into practical delivery of training, again, starting early in the new year, and that will be delivered to all of our officers in the first instance, because I'm clear that if we hope to bring forward the sort of transformation that the Fire Brigade requires and Londoners deserve, it must be driven through the basis of cultural change, which will only come through good leadership. So I hope that gives you some flavour of what is being done and what will be done, but I would welcome further questions on the subject.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, I think those of us who have read the HMI report, as I have today, would be horrified to find that people could be in incident command without being properly validated for up to a year, actually doing the job, and also people who were not able to be revalidated were able to go back straight away on command as well. So presumably, will you be changing those?
Yes, and I can tell you that actually some of our junior incident commanders, with the start of the revalidation of incident command, came off the run this weekend. So I think we will be taking a different approach to incident command moving forward, which is entirely appropriate and aligned to those recommendations laid down in both reports.
And the last point from me before I bring Susan in, level 3 training seems to be virtually non-existent according to HMI report. Is that going to be dealt with?
Yes, so again, the planning for that is in the advanced stages. There was an earlier pilot, but that has undergone revision. My understanding is that because the majority of our incident commanders sit at the level 1 and the level 2 level of incident command, we must prioritise them. I would think that is good planning because that is where the risk lies because of the numbers. But again, level 3 will follow shortly after that. We have a training delivery plan in the context of incident command that lays that out with a clear timescale for delivery.
Okay, well, perhaps we could see that timescale.
Yes, I'll be able to provide that detail to the committee further to this.
I'm going to bring Susan now to talk about resources.
Well, but first I'd like to make a comment. I think it's a real shame that this meeting now is being held on the same day as the report is being released. Some of us have been in meetings all day and have only managed to get snippets of things, and there's clearly much in this that we need to look at and drill down on because it is damning and very, very concerning for all of us. If I can pick up on something you said to the chairman, firefighters will recognise the recommendations. If firefighters recognise the recommendations because they clearly know that they're needed, why on earth have not these issues been elevated through the brigade? If they can see that these things are wrong, why haven't they put it to their senior managers or whatever?
I think that firefighters at times have. I think one of the valid criticisms contained within the report is that the London Fire Brigade actually understood the learning that arose from Grenfell, understood the learning from many of its own internal reports, but was not quick enough to act. Some of the work I've just described has been in the planning a long time, but it is now that it is beginning to deliver. I accept that the delivery of improvement against the learning that was understood has not been quick enough, and that it is my job moving forward as the new London Fire Commissioner to ensure that improvement is delivered at an absolute pace and an urgency prioritised against the areas of greatest risk.
Yes, I mean, it is a great pity that this wasn't taken hold of earlier. So can you commit to us, when will you make sure that all these recommendations have been put into some sort of action?
So we have already developed an action plan. As you're probably aware, we are now beginning to report on a monthly basis both into the Home Office and into City Hall on the basis of the recommendations laid out in Sir Martin Moore-Bick's report. We have already commenced a piece of strategic planning work, which is reframing, really from the very start, our vision, our purpose, our strategic priorities, and a delivery plan that sits underneath that. I expect that developmental work to conclude early in the new year, and I would expect to consult and share that with yourselves and engage with you fully to ensure that it is fit for purpose and it has the scrutiny that it needs.
But that's the planning. What Londoners out there are going to want to know is, when would you, as Commissioner, or when would the Commissioner be happy that all of these recommendations have been put in place and the Fire Brigade is fit for purpose? Because that's what Londoners are concerned about, not the planning or anything else. They want to know when you can look us in the eye and say we are absolutely fit for purpose, because you're clearly not at the moment, and it's a massive worry.
The delivery of priorities will begin immediately on my taking over the Commissioner position on January the 1st. So I think the answer is that delivery will commence immediately, whether it is in the training of our officers in high-rise firefighting, as has started today, in the conduct of mass evacuation and rescue exercises, as we'll roll out in the first part of the new year, in the leadership programme that I described, which will begin immediately in the new year. What I would suggest is that I need to bring the detail of our prioritisation, and in particular what we intend to do around training. I note that the next committee is focused on training, back to the committee for scrutiny, because what I want to do, because the recommendations are so wide-ranging, is prioritise in terms of immediate, medium and long-term delivery. Some of these changes will take a long time to make and embed. Many will not, and we should prioritise those which meet the greatest risk immediately. What I can assure you is change will start as of January the 1st when I assume the position of Commissioner.
Okay, just to give us a date that you think you'll be able to say most of it is fine and the brigade is fit for purpose. How long do you think it will be before you can say that to us? Because that's what Londoners need to know.
I think that is an entirely fair question, but I need to do the planning work to prioritise against the resources we have, and I would like to make the undertaking to bring that back to you with a clear delivery plan, with dates, with owners set against it, and give it to you in the detail, rather than make conjecture today on the basis of that report as it's been released.
Okay.
I know the immediate priorities I will begin delivering, which is around incident command, is around leadership training, is about reaching back into specific parts of London's communities. These things I undertake to do immediately in the early part of next year because they are my priorities. The very detailed work that follows across almost every area of business, as laid out in the HMIC report particularly, needs to be looked at in real detail, worked into an action plan that takes into account the specific Grenfell Tower fire inquiry report recommendations and prioritises on the basis of greatest risk. And that needs to be done objectively and at a pace, and I'm committed to bringing that back to this committee for scrutiny.
The trouble is, all the people out there want to know is, when will we have a fire brigade that is fit for purpose? I hear what you say and I understand what you're saying, but the people out there want to know they've got a fire brigade that is fit for purpose, and it's worrying to us that you cannot give us a date that you think that you'll be able to say, yes, Susan, it's fit for purpose. I'll move on because we've got lots of questions.
Well, I think you should answer that point.
Well, if you can give me a date, because I've asked that 3
I think as a
times.
professional officer, I need to give you an honest answer, and the honest answer is the breadth of those recommendations means that we should give you a detailed plan with timescales
Okay, yeah,
at the earliest opportunity. And perhaps what I would like to say is that we should remember that London firefighters, regardless of the improvements required to the systems that support them and the organisation as a whole, are excellent people. They are out there every day of the year working tirelessly for Londoners, and Londoners should still be confident in that service. I completely recognise the recommendations laid down in both reports. I own that, I take responsibility for that, That is my job as Commissioner moving forward. But I would not want Londoners to think they were not getting the service from our people who are absolutely committed to serving them on a daily basis.
They are absolutely committed, but this is a damning report, and we must accept that. We are here to scrutinise, and that's what we're doing.
Fully
so if I
accept
can
that.
move on.
Just hang on a minute. If you can't give Susan a clear answer about when all this lot would be implemented, when can you give us an implementation plan? Can you give us a date for the implementation plan you're talking about with the benchmarking in it?
I would anticipate bringing an implementation plan. I understand the next committee is early in the new year, looking at training. I would commit to bring an implementation plan back to that committee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if I go on to resources now, do you believe that the London Fire Brigade has sufficient resource to respond to the recommendations arising from both the Grenfell Tower inquiry and the latest Her Majesty's report?
I think that the London Fire Brigade is a well-resourced fire brigade. That is recognised in HMI's report. However, I think this is similar to my last answer in the sense that we need to do the detailed planning to understand the impact of what are a very considerable number of recommendations in the context of a budget gap moving forward. I would want to do that analysis objectively, taking into account priorities, before I was able to give an absolute answer to that. I think we are well resourced. I think London is well looked after, but I think we have to accept that the recommendations are wide and they will require a level of effort to deliver at the speed that Londoners expect and should expect, and we will ensure that is part of the plan that we bring back for scrutiny.
Okay, so while you're doing that, I mean, another thing to come out of the report, somebody's very kindly gone through a lot of it for me, found evidence of it being wasteful with its resources. So along the same lines that you're looking at how much you're going to have to spend, are you going to get other people working on where they've clearly found that you've been very wasteful with your resources?
I think that it is absolutely my responsibility as the new Commissioner to consider how effectively we are spending public money. I think that is different from efficiency, but I would completely accept, as contained within the report, that we need to consider how we make best use of firefighters' time because they are our greatest asset. They're great people. You know, we will definitely be looking at how we make the most effective use of our resources in London.
Okay, I'll leave it there.
I wonder, before you progress to the next formal questions, if I could ask you, please, to expand on a couple of answers that you have already given. You've already agreed with my colleague, Assemblymember Hall, that it's unfortunate your appointment is being made today when this report is published. Do you not think that Londoners would think it's strange that on the day a damning report, which I think you've agreed is a damning report, on the day that that is published, the GLA accepts the Mayor's nomination of you, someone who has served with the brigade since 2002 and has come up through the brigade. In response to your first question, your first answer to Assemblymember Hall, you said that you acknowledge many of the faults which are found in this report, but you said they failed to filter through. Do you not think that that in itself might seem to Londoners that if you were appointed today, that it's odd that someone who knew about all these things or some of these things being wrong had not come forward with them until today?
I think it's an entirely fair question to ask. So I've served my entire 18 years in London. I am a Londoner. I think it gives me some advantage in the sense that I've served at every rank. I have great experience in the London operating environment, probably the most complex operating environment for a fire and rescue service in the world. I think it has given me clear sight of those problems as I've come up through the ranks. And I think the one thing I can say is that in my personal track record, I've demonstrated the ability to drive change at every level of responsibility I've served at, whether as a Deputy Assistant Commissioner, organising and delivering successfully the largest single multi-agency exercise ever delivered in the UK with the recreation of Waterloo Underground Station, or driving through the People Services Review in the first instance as an Assistant Commissioner, which fundamentally restructured the way we support our people, including departmental structures and delivery, or as Assistant Commissioner for Fire Stations, responsible for the operational workforce, brought through successfully, in partnership with the Fire Brigades Union, the Roll to Rank project, which was the single largest change to a rank structure in a UK fire service since the 2003 pay dispute. I think I can personally demonstrate that I've always had a desire and a successful aptitude to deliver change at every level I've been in. And in the position I'm in now as Commissioner, with the ability to drive and lead change at a brigade level, I can absolutely assure you that I will be doing that, and I fully expect you to hold me to account in doing so and to judge me on my performance.
Yeah, my question, and I acknowledge all of the things that you've said, but my question related to the fact that certainly on the papers we have before us, you have not broached either the previous fire authority or the current deputy mayor for fire with your doubts about the brigade, which have been expressed today in the inspector's report. Have you expressed those?
I think that in the suite of reports, actually, that the London Fire Brigade has produced internally since the Grenfell Tower fire, we acknowledged many of the faults that have been highlighted in both the inquiry report and in the report from HMIC. So, for example, if we talk about the People Services Review, which I led, we clearly identified ourselves and on public record that we needed to strengthen the way we trained for leadership. We needed to bring forward improvements to talent management and performance management, change the structures by way we led organisational development, inclusion and recruitment. If you consider the control implementation plan that was brought forward prior again to the publication of both these reports, we clearly outline the areas of improvement that we need to drive through in control with a delivery plan to meet it. We brought in an external expert to consider our training, who delivered significant criticism, aligned again with those findings in those two reports. I think what is a clear criticism within the HMI report today is that whilst we did identify that learning and make it public and available, what we had not done is driven it through with the urgency and speed of delivery that was needed. I accept that finding in totality, and it is my job as the new Commissioner to ensure that we do deliver that change with an urgency and great motivation.
Do you not think, and it's some time since I served on the Fire Authority, but do you not think that ordinary Londoners will say, the new Commissioner has come through the ranks, he's been in the brigade for, I think, nearly 18 years, so he was there all the time that the report refers to, because it doesn't only refer to post-Grenfell, it refers to the state of the brigade. In the light of the fact, in the light of that fact, and in the light of the fact again, which Assembly Member Hall has mentioned, that many of us sitting here, haven't had the opportunity to fully consider the report. I don't know when you first saw it. When did you first see it?
We saw an embargoed copy of the report about a month ago, if I recollect, and obviously the final embargoed copy of the report, as is per the process, and we weren't allowed to share, they're very strict about that, only a day before. Yes. So our actual view of this final copy was yesterday.
Would you think it's strange if this committee or Londoners thought that the appropriate thing to do today, we are in a bit of a spot. We can either approve your appointment or veto your appointment. But do you not think that Londoners might possibly believe that there is a third way here, and that you be appointed on the basis that you do the things that you have outlined to Assembly Member Hall about your action plan and all the rest of it, and your appointment be made substantive after that has happened, do you not think that that would be a reasonable thing for Londoners to expect?
I think that's a matter for the committee to consider and decide. What I would assure you is that I expect to be judged on my performance from the moment I take the post, and I'm highly motivated in my desire to drive forward the improvement and change I've described as Commissioner.
I do understand that, and I think that is right. But given that we only are able to make a binary decision today, either to veto your appointment or to make the appointment, I really wanted to float with you whether or not you thought that the approach that I have outlined, because we can write an addendum to the Mayor to say, yes, we absolutely think that Mr. Rowe should be Commissioner, but the appointment be not confirmed until you have done the things that you have already given an undertaking to do to Assembly Member Hall.
I think firefighters and Londoners deserve a Commissioner who has been appointed substantively to drive that change through as promised, but I fully expect to be judged on my performance and held to account in doing so. I think that what people want is continuity, is commitment, someone who understands London, someone who understands the London Fire Brigade. I think in my experience coming up through the ranks, I demonstrate that. What I expect to be held to account for is the promises I make and the change I'm going to have to bring forward. I think I'm best placed to do that substantively because I think that a temporary position breeds uncertainty at a time of already great uncertainty. But what I fully accept is the recommendations laid down in both reports and my absolute responsibility to drive the change forward to meet them.
Can I just comment here? I don't think we've got the power to do what you're saying, Tony, in that our power today is to confirm or not confirm.
That made the point about the binary decision,
Yeah,
but
that's where we
my
are.
understanding is we can write an addendum.
Well, we can't write an addendum on confirmation. Because it's either confirmed or he isn't. One point I would like to make on the timetable, which you raised earlier, about it's a coincidence that these two have come out today, because the date for this confirmation hearing was set some time ago, before we even knew the date, before we even knew the HMIC were going to produce a report.
Well, no, he said he's had it a month.
No, they had a draft copy, but we only heard about it. You heard about it at the same time I did at the Police and Crime Committee meeting we had with HMICFRS. The point about it is it's an unfortunate timetable, but we're stuck with today's date because of the standing orders of the authority of the GLA, which say we only have 21 days to make a confirmation or not. So it's a coincidence that HMICFRS decided to publish today, but there we are. We didn't have an advance copy of in draft, which is what I think Andy is saying they had. The final version only came out at midnight.
Well, I do feel, speaking personally, that I'm put in a difficult position. I haven't read this report. I certainly haven't had time to consider it, and I know that had I had time to fully consider it, that would have given me an opportunity to frame my questions to you on this matter. I'm clearly going to have to come to a decision later this afternoon, but I find it very difficult. And in a sort of way, Mr. I'm sorry you're kind of involved in that, because this is a kind of bureaucratic thing. But I'm sure you'll understand that the gravamen of my questions is related to that, and it is no way connected with you at all.
I completely understand the question. I think it's a reasonable question to ask. I think what I would reflect is that anyone accepting the Commissioner's position should undertake to come back to this committee and City Hall and provide assurance as to how we are going to deliver improvement against those recommendations in the form of a detailed plan. I think that is utterly what should be expected, and I must bring forward to you as a priority.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can we on to some substantive issues now? And Joe McCartney.
Yes, Deputy Commissioner, looking at your CV and what you've said, you've obviously got a great deal of relevant experience, but actually that step up to the top job of Commissioner can be quite difficult. So how are you going to join your experiences and your personal attributes to make sure that you can make that step confidently?
So I've been leading people my entire career. I was a British Army officer first, so at a very young age. So in my early 20s, I was expected to lead people in dynamic, challenging operational environments. You know, I learned some hard lessons very early in my working life about what it means to take critical decisions in a fast-paced environment, how to gain the trust and respect of people through humility, through good leadership, through accepting that no one is perfect, through taking advice when it is needed. I have worked at challenging inner London stations and boroughs. I have led departments, both in the context of policy, and managed the entire operational workforce as the Assistant Commissioner for Fire Stations for a number of years. I am surrounded by excellent people who provide good advice and will advise me correctly in the context of my role. I am very confident that I can assume the role of Commissioner and drive forward the change we need to give Londoners a service that is fit for purpose in the 21st century.
Thank you. Now, I'm sure you were asked this at your interview, but perhaps you could tell us, looking forward, what do you think is going to be the top 3 challenges that the London Fire Brigade will have over the next 12 months? And how are you going to deal with them? What are you going to bring to it?
Well, I think that actually what I'd like to do is tell you what my top 3 priorities are, because I think they speak to the challenges. I think the first thing I must do as a priority is to reach out personally to the Grenfell community, because I think we have lost, in some ways at a corporate level, the trust of that community, and that must be rebuilt so that wider London has confidence in our service. I will be doing that personally. We are in discussion with the Mayor's Office how to best arrange that, and the communities themselves. That will happen early in the new year. Following that, I've already described it, but I think the changes we need to bring forward will only be driven by a positive improvement in culture, and in particular the culture of leadership in the Fire Brigade. I think that is a challenge. You do not get good transformation unless you have good leadership. I do not think in the past we've invested strongly enough in leadership, so the leadership programme is my next priority, and the way that will be addressed is through straightforward face-to-face delivery out onto our fire stations, to our officers and our crews from early in the new year. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, I undertake, on the basis of a lot of good planning work that has already gone underway in respect to those recommendations, to deliver the Grenfell recommendations in full, because there are detailed points we must do there in relation to building safety, our understanding and recording of risk, high-rise training in particular, the control implementation plan. There are clear plans for delivery with dates and owners set against that. They are my 3 top priorities, because I think they are the 3 challenges we should address first.
Can I just ask an additional question, if I can, and that's around transparency? Because I'm not on this committee, normally I'm substituting today, but I have been struck by some members saying that the report that came out today, they were asking questions previously and don't feel they've got the correct understanding of what was actually going on. So could you just give us an assurance today that where things go well, you'll tell us, but also where things are not going so well, that you will be open and transparent about that process?
I welcome challenge. I think the mark of a confident and well-operating organisation is the ability to take challenge, learn from it and deliver improvement. I think we need to strengthen the way we work with City Hall in the context of scrutiny and in the context of challenge, how we develop our plans going forward for Londoners, and I would want to work with both the Mayor's Office and the relevant committees to do so.
David.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Deputy Commissioner. So we just talked about challenges, but what do you think is the biggest opportunity that you would have as London Fire Commissioner over the next 12 months?
I actually think that both reports, although they are hard-hitting and hard for many in the brigade to read, hard for Londoners to read, they represent an opportunity, because the greatest catalyst for change is when you accept challenge and you have a clear pathway for improvement. So actually, I think the greatest opportunity is those 2 reports, because they lay out very clearly objectively, in a way we completely accept, what we need to do to ensure Londoners get the service they deserve, and more importantly, the excellent people who are serving Londoners on a day-to-day basis, our firefighters, also get the service they deserve.
And what skills do you think that you have that makes you the best person to do that?
I think I'm open. I think I'm someone who listens. I think I'm ready to accept challenge. I know that I haven't got all the answers, and therefore I need to find people who do have the answers, who complement my skill set. I recognise that what is most important is to empower people at every level of my organisation to deliver for me. I think I'm good at delivering a message simply and in a way that is relevant to someone, whatever level of the organisation they're at. And I have confidence in my people, and I think that shines through, and I think they will come with me on that journey of change.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Okay, Yoni.
Thanks very much, Chair. I was going to ask you about your key priorities for 2020. I'm not going to, because I'm very clear as to what your 3 key priorities are from the answer that you just gave to Assemblymember McCartney. What I am going to ask you about instead, though, is about your style of leadership. One of the things that also comes across in the HMIC report is that there's been a lack of flexibility. But you yourself, in fact, of course, have been identified with being willing to change the stay put at Grenfell. Would you say that flexibility characterises your leadership style? You just talked about being in the army and being in dynamic situations. Would you say that you've got some learning from there?
I think that I've gathered learning all the way on my journey, I guess. And I think the day that you think as a leader you're not learning, you're probably not a very good leader, actually. I think there's always room to improve. How would I characterise the things I think are important in leadership, what I want from my leaders in the London Fire Brigade? First of all, I think they have to be kind and they have to be compassionate. We are meant to be a kind and compassionate service, delivering that to Londoners. So I want my people to start with that, to put their people's welfare at the top of the hierarchy of needs, because I know from long experience in very difficult operational situations, when you treat your people properly with respect and kindness, they will do amazing things for you. And I have seen firefighters do amazing things for me. I also need people to be robust. We're a big, rough, tough workforce, and people need to be managed and need to be led in a way that makes them feel safe and boundaried. So as much as I need my leaders to be kind, I need them to be able to effectively boundary our people and provide clear direction. I need them to be decisive, and this is where I think flexibility is important. I think have the ability to recognise when they need to think outside the box, make a decision quickly and own that decision, and then perhaps lastly and most importantly, have the humility to recognise that they don't always have the answers and that decision in itself might be wrong. Be prepared to accept the challenge and change the decision and still own it accordingly. I think that is how I would embody my own leadership style, and it is how I would want my leaders to work for us and the people of London.
So that's an interesting set of features. I just want to come to that last one, where you talked about humility and not always being right, because I think that's a point where you can achieve learning if there's also reflection. Would you say that that would also be something important to make sure is part of the journey going forward?
100%, yes. I think a reflective style of leadership is extremely important. We operate in one of the most complex risk environments in the world, a city of, on a daily basis, nearly 9 million people. You know, the breadth and depth of that risk means you cannot take anything for granted. You need to have flexibility of thought and approach in order to make effective decisions, prepare to be challenged, and then arrive at a good decision on the basis of that challenge, yes. But we need to empower our people to do that. We need to train them to do that. It's not just a given. It won't come naturally to everyone. I think the vast majority of our people, by the nature of their characters, the sort of people who join the London Fire Brigade, had every potential to get there, but we need to invest in them to do that.
Okay, thank you. I also want to ask you about a culture that fosters diversity and inclusion, which I think is something that is another journey that the brigade has started to go on and actually is arguably farther ahead than a number of the other brigades around the country. And I want you to also tell us about the world record.
The world record?
Yes.
Well, you're going to have to help me there.
Fire hoses?
Oh, the fire hoses. The HIV awareness day. No, that was a great event at Woolwich. But perhaps to come back to your first more serious point, the London Fire Brigade at the moment doesn't look like London. It doesn't look like my family. You know, my kids are mixed race, dual heritage, whatever you want to call it. I've got a very large and complicated London family. I need to see what sits in my living room sit in watch rooms as well. It's very important we do so in order to remain relevant to London and give them the best service. That is not to diminish the quality of the people we currently employ. They're great people. We just need to change with London. So one of the functions that arose from the People Services Review was a change to our recruitment function. We moved outreach into our community teams who are out there in communities every day. I think we're beginning to see the results of that. So in the last recruitment campaign, we had 650 applicants, of which 30% were women, 41% were BAME, and of the 78 applicants out of those 650 offered jobs, 26% were women and 28% were BME. We can never be complacent about this. This is something that never ends, and we have to keep our eye on it. What I'm particularly interested in is the retention and promotion of staff as well. And I'm very sure, and I'm personally committed, because it is personally important to me, to taking the London Fire Brigade on that journey, because it offers us diversity of thought and decision making again. It gives us the best people from across all the communities in London. It gives us the ability to understand and reach into those communities in a better way. You know, there are so many reasons to do it that I can do nothing else but personally own it and seek to drive it forward.
And why did you think getting involved in the fire hoses was an important thing to be doing for the brigade?
Because I think actually it demonstrated that we serve all of London, even the most marginalised communities, those people with HIV, who, if you look at the record of how people with HIV are treated across the world, it is one of marginalisation, not of good treatment. And I wanted London to recognise, actually, that as an organisation that perhaps prior to Danny was seen as very male, perhaps not open to serving that community, was. And in our crews of all different backgrounds coming together that day, because there were very many firefighters there of all backgrounds there that day, you know, enjoying the opportunity to set a world record, I think we really showed that we reach across all of London communities and serve and protect them.
And my final question, you talked about one of your priorities being to reach out to the Grenfell community. You've also just talked about the brigade reflecting London and its many communities. How will you ensure that the brigade listens to all of London's communities?
I think that's got to happen at every level, so both out in the boroughs, so ensuring that our borough commanders build and effectively maintain partnerships with important local community leaders and community representatives. At a strategic level, whether it's myself reaching out into the Grenfell community, looking at the opportunity to open the brigade up to scrutiny by involving members of the community. I think it's an area that we need to develop further, and again, I would be willing and would enjoy exploring that with members of the Greater London Authority, the Mayor's Office, to better improve those structures, to open ourselves up in that way.
Thank you, Chair.
Back to Susan.
Okay, just a couple more. We're aware that a PowerPoint presentation was given to senior staff some years ago regarding cladding fires, yet this information was never filtered down to lower level staff, which would have been helpful at Grenfell. How will you ensure that something like this doesn't happen again in your new leadership role?
By ensuring the structures by which we receive information, whether it's nationally or whether horizon scanning, looking at incidents of international interest, are brought into a single point of entry and then disseminated as part of maintenance of skills. We've already started to consider this, and the mechanisms by which that might happen, I think it's likely we will use existing boards such as the Operational Professionalism Board, but I'm very clear that that is something we will have to do in a way that, again, stands up to scrutiny and assurance.
Again, I'm somewhat concerned because it's something you know you've got to do. Grenfell is a while ago. It's clearly something that should be happening, but it's the urgency of putting all these things in. That
Perhaps I haven't expressed myself properly. I think we are doing that. I think we are looking at learning across the police, whether it's through the National Operational Learning Portal, whether it's coming in via NFCC, whether it's something that fire engineers pick up. I think the route to that is through OPB and the Operational Improvement Plan. I think we are doing that. And I think with the changes we made to the maintenance of skills training in the summer, we now have a clear route for that information coming in and being disseminated to all crews. For example, we had some information from NFCC last week around high-rise, which was disseminated to all crews and officers because we have that process in place.
Okay, why do you think that the staff don't have confidence in the process for selecting, developing and promoting middle and senior managers?
I think that has lacked transparency in the past. I don't think that is the case now. But I think we have to work to regain their confidence. I think that takes time. I think we do that in the transparency of how we advertise and prepare people for those processes. And most importantly, we need to bring forward a suitable appraisal system, because I think that is the greatest issue at the moment. It is very difficult to give people the confidence in those processes if we do not have an appraisal system that provides the information to feed into them and highlight those people most appropriate to enter them. That, again, is being brought forward at a pace and should deliver in the new year, because the planning work has been done for it. We brought in external consultants to look at it. It was something that arose from the People Services Review as a clearly highlighted need. I think that is the way we will do it, because it will be a much clearer and simpler structure, providing a route into talent identification and promotion.
And how do you think you're going to increase the public's confidence in the London Fire Brigade, which Grenfell is really shaken, and this report won't help either?
By being transparent in the way we open ourselves up to scrutiny and allowing that to be seen in the widest possible sense. I think that obviously committees such as this provide clear example of how we are open to those questions being asked. And I think we need to look and work with City Hall and major stakeholders such as the Home Office, how we best publicise the changes we are making and the scrutiny that is being brought to bear on them.
Right, well, we've talked a little bit about, well, quite a bit about Grenfell actually, and I'd like to sort of follow on that theme both specifically and a little more generally. Because if you put the two reports together, one of the things that we've kept pushing you on is how slow the brigade has been to change, even for risk-critical matters. So, first question, I suppose, is how you make sure the brigade implements change promptly and quickly, and in particular, how do you ensure the recommendations of the Grenfell Tower Inquiry report are carried out as effectively and swiftly as possible?
So I think one of the most telling points inside the HMI report is that we do not have a corporate delivery plan that is linked explicitly to the London Safety Plan. I think that is how we give Londoners and this committee the confidence that we will deliver, because that piece of strategic planning work will give us a corporate plan with clearly articulated priorities, which we will need to consult and work with City Hall to ensure it is fit for purpose, so it is scrutinised in the right way. And that will give us a timescale, clear owners of items for delivery, prioritise against those issues that present the greatest risk. I think that is how we give Londoners the confidence that we are making change. And then it is my duty, it is my responsibility as the Commissioner to drive that change forward successfully against clearly articulated timescales.
Could I just note that Leonie Cooper has left and Nikki Gavron is substituting for her. Following on from that, is part of the problem that we've seen so far that when you do make change, slow or fast, it's not publicised to the Londoners. What will you do as change happens to make sure that Londoners know you're actually acting on these things rather than producing some dry report that we read here and consider and ask you about but doesn't go any further?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I think we need to tell our story better. I think our people are doing amazing things on a daily basis. I think, out in our communities, making people safer, protecting and serving them. And they're doing that because they're good people and so much is happening. I mean, some of the change we have brought forward since the Grenfell Tower fire is worth reflecting on. I'm not sure we have told that story effectively, but for example, we are the first fire and rescue service in the country to have smoke hoods on every single appliance. Those smoke hoods, since the Grenfell Tower fire, have rescued 30 people, bringing them through irrespirable atmosphere across 19 incidents. We are completely refreshing the aerial fleet, improving and strengthening it. Those appliances are arriving in January. We have made significant change to training already. We have begun to drive through the control implementation plan. I am not sure we have articulated that in a way that tells the picture successfully. And I know an important part of being an emergency service is that you hold the confidence of the people you serve. And part of holding the confidence of the people you serve, so you deliver the best service you can, is telling your story. That is also part of the improvement we must bring forward.
Okay, so moving on to maintaining confidence of people. After Grenfell, we know that many Londoners live in unsafe buildings, both high-rise and we now know from the three fires I think we've had in London since, low-rise as well with cladding and so forth. Hundreds of buildings, if not more. How will you ensure the brigade protects these residents and also is able to have their confidence that they will be safe if something happens in those blocks?
I think to begin with, it's worth highlighting the work that's already been done. So there are approximately 400 of those.
That's the point I was making earlier, about making sure that people know what you've actually done.
Yeah, there's approximately 400 of those blocks in London, of which we have identified them. We know what that risk represents. Whilst we cannot be held responsible for the cladding nor the improvement works that need to be made to those buildings to ultimately make them safe for their residents, what we have done through our powers of regulation is ensure that there are waking watches in those buildings. So there is 24-hour sight on the safety of those residents. We visit those blocks regularly, weekly if necessary at times, to ensure that those measures are in place. So actually, I think we can assure Londoners who live in those blocks that we are sighted on where they live and we have put in place the precautions required to make them as safe as possible until the necessary remedial works are done to ensure they are sustainably safe in the long term. So that's what we've done so far. I think on a bigger picture scale across the country, we have obviously worked tirelessly since the Grenfell Tower fire to influence and help and advise and support the great work that's been undertaken to change and improve building regulation. We will continue to do that. I look forward as a new commissioner in continuing to support and work with the Greater London Authority and central government to bring forward ultimately the changes in building regulation that will need to be made to ensure that residents of high-rise tower blocks and buildings of all other sorts can live safely in them, sure that they are protected against the danger of fire through the method of construction, development and planning.
That's 400 tower blocks which are potentially at risk. What about the low-rise blocks, other blocks covered in cladding? As we saw, I think we've had 3 fires in the last 6 months or so in London involving other low-rise blocks which have gone up like Roman candles.
Yeah, so I think there is an emerging understanding of the risk in the built environment, of which we cannot entirely quantify at the moment. For example, I was in charge of a 25-pump fire in Worcester Park, a high-value residential scheme where a block was engulfed in fire within minutes by nature of the construction. It's clear to me that the way we will improve that is by driving forward change in the regulated environment, and the best way we can do that is by offering good support to government and local authorities by way of our expertise and finding a way to best pragmatically deliver that change, because we would not want to slow building down either. Whilst it is vital that people are safe in their homes, I would recognise that this needs to be practically achievable for people as well. London's economy relies on building as well. We need to be an informed, objective, professional voice in that debate, as we have been, and we will continue to drive forward the changes we know that need to be made to ensure Londoners and people all over this country are safe in the buildings they live and work in. In the context of scale, it may be worth perhaps reminding the committee that we have at least 800,000 buildings that fall under the regulatory reform order in London. So those are the things that we would regulate by nature of their construction. And obviously the built environment extends way beyond that in London. So as a point of principle, it's very important to me that we come in at a level nationally to best drive forward improvement in the regulation, which is what ultimately protects people.
Okay, thank you. Tony.
Yes. You've been a substantial budget holder in your as Assistant Commissioner. In the report, in today's report, I have picked out a paragraph here. It says, by way of criticism of the brigade, in recent years, innovation has been stifled. There is no track record of service design or finding efficiencies in operational areas because the Mayor of London has given extra funding to maintain levels of spending. Do you agree with that?
I think that London is the most complex risk environment a fire and rescue service is operating, both in terms of scale and in perhaps what is an emerging challenge in the built environment. I think there is in some way a risk that we diminish the changes and the scale of improvement we need to be bringing.
You're not answering my question, or not even seeking to answer my question.
Apologies, perhaps I haven't been quick enough to get to the point.
The question says that you have not been looking for efficiencies because the Mayor has been giving you money. Do you agree with that?
I think we need to focus on effectiveness rather than efficiency. I believe in a city on the scale of London, the resources we have are broadly correct. What I'm interested in is the way we use those resources to best effect to protect and serve Londoners. That I completely acknowledge, and we will be seeking to explore as part of the strategic planning work.
If the Mayor were to stop, in effect, giving you, as they're inferring, surplus money, will the brigade be able to provide these organisational changes which the inspectors seem to think that you can?
I know we're going to discuss this in greater detail potentially tomorrow because we have the Budget and Performance Management Committee, and I look forward to doing so. But I think as a headline, I think it's fair to say that LFB has and continues to face significant financial challenges, obviously including the fate of 22 million in the firefighter pensions grant, the implications of all the changes that have been suggested. I think the work to assess the financial impact of that, and I'm perhaps going back to the answer I gave earlier, but the work to assess that, the strategic planning work, is ongoing. And while some of those potential costs are included in the LFB budget submission, there are notable exclusions, which include the recommendations that we will need to make improvements against for Grenfell. We need to cost those as part of a prioritised delivery plan.
Again, Mr. Rowe, you're not answering my question. What the inspectors are saying is that because the Mayor is always stumped up, the brigade has not responded to the need to make efficiencies. And I simply asked you whether or not you agreed with that.
As I said, I think that I need to consider the effectiveness of the resources we currently have. I believe the resources we currently have are broadly correct for a city of this size, complexity, and with the emerging challenges that have been identified in both reports. What I undertake to do in the strategic planning work is to look at that objectively in terms of how we use those resources, whether there are any structural changes that will need to be made, and we will do so in a clear-sighted way, laying out priorities for delivery with clear costings against those priorities.
Mr. Rowe, the headline in the report talks about how well resourced the brigade has been. Do you agree that the brigade is well resourced?
I think the brigade is resourced correctly for a city of this size, this complexity, with the number of residents and the emerging challenges we face.
Does that mean that you agree that you're well resourced? Simply saying that the resources you've been given are sufficient does not match up with the suggestion which is made by the inspectors that because you knew that the Mayor was always going to stump up, you have not made proper efficiencies.
I think we are correctly resourced. I think we need to consider the effectiveness of the way in which we use those resources. But I would like to say that those resources ensure that Londoners receive the best attendance of any emergency fire appliances in the country, that is the most basic promise upon which our service is made, and that the level of resourcing that is committed to ensure that continues is based on very detailed modelling. It is based on evidence in the context of locations and crewing and journey times. I would not want to deviate from that promise, because I think it is that at the most basic level that keeps Londoners safe, the 6-minute and the 8-minute attendance times.
Nobody is disagreeing with the performance, with what you do with the money. What I am seeking to get from you is an acknowledgement that the Inspectorate is right when it says that one of the ways in which you have met difficulties, and that has been a criticism which over the years has been expressed of the brigade, that when the brigade says that they are in some sort of financial difficulty, the mayor, and let's be fair, no matter what colour, has stumped up, which has meant that serving officers like yourself, when you were in charge of these budgets, have not felt the necessity to go for, I quote, service design and finding efficiencies in operational areas. Do you simply agree with that?
I agree that I have absolute responsibility as Commissioner to make best use of public funds, to consider the effectiveness of how we employ those resources within allocated budget. I undertake, again, as I said at the start, to bring to you a delivery plan that will include how we deliver our service strategically across London, with costed priorities set particularly against the recommendations contained within both reports. But at this point of particular challenge and the need to transform.
I understand that. That's talking about the future. This report from the inspectors talks about the practices which are being carried out during a time when you were a budget holder, and they have made the point, and I repeat it, I think for the third time, that you have not carried out efficiencies because you knew that the mayor will give you funding. And right at the very beginning you said you agree with nearly everything the inspectors have said. Is this something you disagree with?
I accept the recommendations of the report in full.
All right.
What I am committing to going forward is that we will look objectively at the strategic delivery of our service to Londoners. That will include how we use our resources, the level of resourcing required to bring the very considerable transformation through that is required. I take that responsibility and I will have to provide that information for scrutiny.
All right,
that is my responsibility.
Let me try and put the question another way. When you're Commissioner and you find that there are difficulties in meeting your budgets, will you think that a solution is to go to the Mayor and say, give us some money to cover this?
I would not be as crude as that. I think we have to come to yourselves in City Hall, to the various committees for scrutiny with an objective plan based on good business case set against a clearly articulated risk with priorities for delivery. I will deliver that in a professional and objective manner set against the needs of London. And that will be what it will be, based on the evidence and based on the cost of delivering that service.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I think if you read the chapter on that, Tony, you'll see it's not quite as damning as you may see.
Well, I'm reading from the officer's report.
Well, I'm reading the whole thing. Anyway, perhaps I could finish off with just one last question, Andy, and that's about the forthcoming London Safety Plan. As we know, the current one runs out in 2021, just over 15 months away. What do you envisage going to be the major changes in the next version of the London Safety Plan?
I think in the first instance, we have to recognise some of the priorities I've talked about, which is obviously it must refer directly to the recommendations laid down in both reports. For the London Safety Plan not to refer to both of those reports and articulate clearly how we are going to bring forward the change to meet the improvements required to satisfy the recommendations would not be suitable. It would not be suitable not to have that in the report. So that must form part of the next London Safety Plan. I think we need to better articulate how we really connect with communities and, as I explained earlier, tell our story, because I think that is important in terms of maintaining and, where necessary, rebuilding public confidence. And I think we have to give clear timelines for all of the improvements that we will need to bring forward.
So, were you indicating, Nikki?
Yes. Just wanted to come in with a final question, if that's okay with you, Chair. Deputy Commissioner, you have, and I've read it up, you have enormous experience in many, many parts of the authority and the brigade. And I'm just interested to know, what experience have you got of influencing government in terms of decisions that affect your role and the role of the brigade?
So in a number of the appointments I've held in the brigade, I've had to engage with both central government, local government, strategic partners across other emergency services, national colleagues within what was CFAR and now NFCC. I have a very good understanding, I think, of the importance of engaging with all our stakeholders across both the political spectrum and also partners out in the community, in other statutory authorities. I know that our service is first and foremost delivered by our reputation and the confidence people have in it. One of the most fundamental pillars of that is the ability to communicate effectively with all our important stakeholders.
Could you give me an example of where you've influenced the government in making a decision?
Are we talking about central government or
central
are we talking
government?
I think that part of my journey to this position has been, particularly in the past year or so, engaging with the Home Office. We've helped provide data to them to inform the comprehensive spending review that will be imminent. And if you were to talk to colleagues within the Home Office, they would recognise that we have some of the best data processes in the country, and that has directly informed their thoughts and the decisions they're beginning to make around how that comprehensive spending review will be framed.
Have you got one in the past where you have, I mean, this is, you may have influenced government, we don't yet know, one where you have influenced them in the
I haven't directly influenced central government to take a political decision in the context of the fire service because of the nature of the positions I've held. What I would say is that I have a very long experience of acting as a spokesperson and ambassador for the London Fire Brigade, of working with both political and non-political partners in the delivery of our priority messages, whether that be in partnership with the Fire Brigades Union, whether that is with other statutory agencies, whether, in fact, as a prime example, running the largest ever exercise held in the UK with multiple stakeholders, including central government actually involved in that, EU funding, 2,500 people a day engaged in that. So I think I have long experience of the challenge of ensuring multiple stakeholders are engaged and are satisfied that we are doing the best for the people of London. And I'm absolutely clear, as with everything else, that is ultimately my responsibility as the Commissioner moving forward to ensure that stakeholder engagement is effective. And we do positively support government, both local and central, to achieve the best for Londoners in the context of their fire service.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Andy, can I thank you for attending today and for answering our questions. I'll invite you to leave the chamber floor now so we can have our discussion on what we should recommend to the Mayor. But you're welcome to remain in the public gallery to hear our deliberations.
Thank you. Before I go, can I just say, regardless of outcome, what an absolute privilege as both a Londoner, a South London boy, and as a London firefighter my whole career, it is to find myself in this position. I cannot imagine a better job in the world than to lead the men and women of the London Fire Brigade. I think they are excellent people. I stood in front of 200 of them at the Grenfell Tower fire. I asked them to put themselves at risk time and time again. Not one of them took a step back. They exemplify to me the absolute qualities of public duty, personal sacrifice, selflessness and service. I'm enormously excited to be even in the position where I might be able to take this opportunity, and I look forward, if appointed, to driving forward the sort of transformation I think London and Londoners should expect to give them the service they absolutely deserve. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. For those who are interested, the process for appointing the Commissioner, because that was coming up in early discussions, was that there was a nationwide advertising campaign. There was a global search through headhunters. There were about 40 applicants with 20 on the long list 10 on the shortlist, 4 at the first round of interviews and 3 at the final interview, including 1 international candidate. While the final decision rests with the Mayor, the Home Office were also involved throughout. So I think that helps make the point that we had a pretty thorough search to find out our candidate. So we've got to decide whether or not we wish to recommend the Mayor should proceed with his appointment. I know Tony was expressing some concerns, and I would suggest that one possible way through that is for us to recommend to the Mayor that he proceeds with the appointment, whilst noting the various undertakings that Andy has given us today as to how he proposes to proceed over the forthcoming months. And I think we'll know pretty quickly whether that's been delivered. That would be my suggestion.
Yep.
Good.
Can we just confirm who did the interviews?
We could, except I don't know. I don't know. I believe it was the Deputy Mayor, and I think it was the Mayor's Chief of Staff, but I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, so my proposal, therefore, is that we recommend that the Mayor should proceed with the appointment of Andy Rowe, Deputy Commissioner to the Office of the London Fire Commissioner, and in our letter to the Mayor, to be agreed in the usual channels as the wording, that we record in our letter the various undertakings that he's given us today in the Q&A session.
Fine, thank you.
Go with that.
Yes, well, we've just done that. We've agreed to delegate to me in the usual channels, yes. Okay, well, everybody agreed?
Yep,
Agreed.
agreed.
That's unanimous then. Thank you very much. Meeting is over.
GLA Chamber South.